Picture this, a golden terrace completely bathed in late afternoon sunlight. Two colleagues, Arav and Mira, are taking a philosophical walk. Mira places a small brass sundial on a table, its shadow cutting sharply across the engraved numbers. And right next to it, Arav sets down a packet of dried apricots and a freshly printed valuation model from a local agrotech startup. It's not just atmospheric, it's the absolute perfect backdrop for figuring out what something is really worth. Because, as we'll see, determining worth isn't just about crunching numbers in rupees or dollars. It's about understanding the rhythm of time and potential.
I absolutely love this realization from Mira. She says, valuation, not just as calculation, as care. Right out of the gate, that establishes that valuation isn't some cold calculator. When we value an asset, a business, or an investment, we are measuring what something truly represents. We're essentially taking the time to care about its current reality and, of course, its future potential.
So, to keep us grounded as we explore all this, here is our roadmap for today's explainer. We'll start with the rhythm of worth, dive into the time value of money, look at valuing promises and securities, cover investment appraisal techniques, and finally end up where math meets meaning. Let's get right into it.
Part 1, the rhythm of worth, blending numbers and narrative.
At the end of the day, valuation really just asks two simple questions. What is this worth, and why? Arav and Mira make such a great point here. They emphasize that determining worth goes way beyond looking at a simple price tag. It's the active process of determining the present worth of an asset, an investment, or a whole enterprise. And it requires a really delicate balance. You absolutely need the numbers to give you a foundation, but you also need the narrative, the why. You need that story to understand the true potential of what you're actually valuing.
Moving on to Part 2, the time value of money, treating time as a lens.
Okay, think about this fundamental difference. A rupee in your hand today versus a rupee promised to you tomorrow. Arav points out a literal golden rule of finance. Money in your hand today is inherently worth more than the exact same amount tomorrow. Why is that? Well, because of earning potential, you could invest it today. Because of inflation, things just get more expensive over time. And honestly, because of sheer uncertainty, tomorrow is never guaranteed. Time literally degrades the raw value of static money, which is exactly why our financial models have to account for it. To bring this underlying math down to earth, Mira tells this amazing little story about a local weaver who instinctively offered discounts to customers if they paid him upfront. She notes, he didn't use jargon, but he understood time value. He intuitively knew that having that cash in hand today gave him security and purchasing power that a promise of payment next week simply could never match.
Which brings us to Section 3, valuing promises and securities, essentially measuring belief.
Since the concept of time value is the bedrock for all these financial models, how do we actually measure the strength of formal financial promises or securities? Well, we mainly rely on three core tools depending on the instrument. For equity, we often use discounted cash flow, or DCF. For debt instruments, we look at the present value of future coupons for bonds. And finally, we use market comparables to assess things like brand valuation by looking at what similar entities are worth. Let's look at a real-world example of this. Take that agrotech startup Arav and Mira were analyzing. They projected their cash flows for 5 years and then discounted them back to today's value using a 12% rate. Now, that 12% discount rate wasn't just some random number plugged into a spreadsheet. It was a powerful story of belief. It represented the exact level of risk and the exact expectation that both the founders and the investors were willing to accept to actually make that business a reality. You literally see this humanity in finance everywhere. Take a local cooperative pricing bonds to fund a cold storage unit. By calculating the present value of future repayments, they're essentially building a bridge of trust between an immediate need and their community. Meanwhile, you might have a small publishing house using market comparables to figure out its brand value before partnering with a distributor. It might not be mathematically perfect down to the last decimal, but it's a participatory, genuinely fair way to agree on worth.
All right, Section 4, investment appraisal techniques, how we actually make the decision.
Our first heavy hitter is net present value, or NPV for short. It's simply the mathematical difference between the present value of your cash inflows and outflows over time. If your NPV comes out as a positive number, it means the investment directly adds value. As Mira perfectly puts it, a positive NPV turns a basic profit into a definitive promise that the venture is fundamentally worth undertaking. Let's apply this to a local bakery. They're looking at an upfront cost of 2 lakh rupees for a brand new oven.
So they calculate the projected savings and the increased bread output over time, they discount those future flows, and boom, they achieve a positive NPV of 40,000 rupees. And because that NPV was positive, they went ahead and bought the oven. The decision wasn't just about baking more bread, it was financially wise.
Now, if NPV tells us the total value added, our next tool, the internal rate of return, or IRR, gives us the exact pulse. IRR is the specific discount rate that makes the net present value of a project exactly zero. It's an absolutely essential tool because it helps businesses easily compare totally different projects by finding the intrinsic heartbeat of their potential return. To see IRR in action, look at how this solar firm evaluated two prospective locations for a new panel array. Location A offered a 14% return, while location B was sitting at 11%. By distilling all those complex future cash flows into one single percentage, the firm used IRR to confidently choose location A. It's just a beautifully clear, comparable metric. And finally, we have the payback period. This is as straightforward as it gets. It is the ultimate baseline metric, exactly how long it takes to recover your initial investment and hit break even. It doesn't look at the entire lifespan of the project, it strictly measures the specific timeline required to earn back those upfront costs. For instance, imagine a community theater group buying new sound equipment. Based on what they'd save on rentals, they calculated a payback period of exactly 18 months. That 18 isn't just a number on a page. It dictated the entire financial rhythm of their upcoming seasons and gave them a crystal clear timeline for when that equipment would essentially become free to use. Which brings us to our fifth and final section, math meets meaning, the incredibly dynamic nature of value. Because here's the reality, valuation is never, ever completely static. It shifts massively depending on context, investor confidence, and the overall clarity of the market. Especially when things get volatile, these numbers have to be constantly reevaluated. Plus, we absolutely have to acknowledge that true value very often resides in invisible assets. It lives in the strength of your relationships, a hard-earned reputation, and a company's sheer resilience when times get tough. As that sundial casts a long shadow on their terrace and the afternoon wraps up, Mira and Arav perfectly sum up everything we've explored today. Mira whispers, "Valuation is not just math, it's meaning." And Arav replies, "And value is not just return, it's rhythm." They remind us that the formulas, the math, the spreadsheets, they only matter because of the human intent behind them. So I want to leave you with a final thought, pulled straight from Arav and Mira's notebook. Ask yourself, right now, what do you value? How do you personally measure worth? What does time actually mean in your decisions? And how do you balance your own belief with cold calculation? Let those questions really sit with you the next time you try to measure the worth of an investment, a project, or even your own time. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the true value of the world around you.